People who sleep naked. When has it backfired? Story 1. Not me, but I was spending the night at my friend's house in a suburban neighborhood. In the middle of the night, his mom had let their toy fox terrier, and it got snatched by a coyote. She screamed and woke us all up. A wolf got Noodle! Within 10 seconds, his dad was spurting out of the house completely butt-ass naked with a Glock in his hand and went running down the street. Came back about 15 minutes later with the dog, and obviously still completely naked. Story 2. There was one morning in high school when my dad decided to wake me up for school by ripping the covers off me in bed. That was the last time that happened. Story 3. I had a closet-sized single dorm room and people would always pull the fire alarm in the middle of the night and we'd all have to go outside. One time I was so drowsy I just walked out instinctively and halfway down the hall I raced back. Thankfully this was an old building so I didn't get locked out of the room. My buddy's apartment burned down a few years ago. It was already engulfed by the time he woke up. His arms, upper back, and ears got pretty effed up running out of it in his t-shirt. Still pretty purple to this day. He took a few seconds to put on his work pants and boots. Probably saved his life. Definitely saved his junk. Story 4. I don't know if I call it backfired, but when the suicidal girl that's staying the night at your brother's house because they're watching this girl for suicide reasons wakes you up in the middle of the night and is sitting right on top of you telling you that you have to talk her down right then and there or she's going to kill herself in front of you, yeah, you would probably just rather be clothed for that encounter. Story 5. I locked myself out of my flat while sleepwalking. My girlfriend was on holiday so I had to wait until morning, borrow a towel from a neighbor, and then walk about a mile up the road to the estate agent to get a spare key. Story 6. Been sleeping in the raw since I was a kid and would fidget out of my PJs. I think it used to bug my mother, but she finally gave up. Every girlfriend would start out the relationship by joining me, but over time would end up with the conventional night clothes. Hasn't backfired on me yet. Story 7. I normally don't do this, but one summer night, I had a meal from my local Mexican place that I love. Since I was busy that day, I didn't have lunch and decided to get significantly more than what I normally order to cure the hangry. I also did not get an opportunity to poop that day. Since it was unusually hot that night, I decided to ditch everything and sleep bare. After one very realistic dream of me on the toilet, let's just say I had to get a new set of bed sheets the next morning. Story 8. I was at a hotel and the fire alarm went off. I had to very quickly find clothes and get dressed. It was a legit small fire too. Story 9. Never. Chased a burglar down the stairs, through the kitchen, out my front door without wearing a shred of clothing and no weapon in hand. The power of nakedness. Story 10. I started somewhere in high school because of night sweats. In college, I moved into an on-campus apartment, alone, and the very next morning, I woke up to 3 grown mid-50s dudes with their faces in my window. My bed was directly below the window. University housing gave some BS excuse about my window needing maintenance. Just my window specifically. None of the others in the entire complex. The window wasn't even designed to open. I think they were being pigs. But I was 1,000 miles away from anyone who cared about me, and just let it go. Story 11. When I was in uni, my room was right in front of the university, so when looking out my windows, you would look straight into classrooms. So one day, the inevitable happened. I had forgotten to close the curtains at night. You couldn't see me while I was in bed due to the head of the bed obstructing the window. However, getting out of bed would expose my entire naked body to the world, so any bored student whose sight was wandering off outside the classroom window could get a nice viewing of my naked body. The way I fixed it was by simply rolling up in my bed sheets and sort of hoping my curtains in my bed sheet roll. I am male, by the way, so I didn't have to cover up breasts. Story 12. A few years ago, I was working a night shift and had just returned home at 7 a.m. I was so tired that I didn't close the front door properly. After I activated the house alarm, I went to my room and undressed myself and went to bed. I wake up to the alarm blaring and I look around my room as I hear yelling. I see there are 2 female cops in the house and their guns out, and one of them was pointing it at me. I'm half asleep and not really understanding what was going on. The officer asked if I lived here, to which I said yes. Then she ordered me to show her my ID. My ID, which was in my wallet, was on my dresser. I pointed her to where my wallet was. She ordered me to show it to her, and I said I couldn't get up because I was naked under my blanket. So, while still pointing her gun at me, she opened up my wallet. After that, the cops left, and after securing the front door properly, I went back to sleep. Story 13. Basic training. Getting called out of bed because someone fell asleep on guard duty. My private was standing at attention. Story 14. When my little cousin, who is a male, pulled my blankets off to wake me up. He was not expecting his oldest female cousin to be completely nude. That was a very awkward moment. Story 15. I was young, like 12, and had just hit puberty. I had slept naked my whole life, and it didn't change. A super hot babysitter that I didn't know was gonna work tried waking me up, which was hard because I was a really heavy sleeper. I woke up right as she pulled the covers off me to behold my 12-year-old rock-hard morning wood cock. Story 16. I was at a house fire once during the night, and the homeowner slept naked. When we arrived, he was running around his front yard naked with a garden hose. Thankfully, he was not injured, and we were able to salvage most of his belongings. And the one thing he said is that he learned to now sleep with shorts on. My dad always sleeps in the nude. One day, the neighbor's house across the street caught fire after the gas-powered water heater exploded. He could hear the homeowner screaming for help all the way from inside our house. So, still naked, he ran into the burning house and carried her out. Firefighters said if he had been wearing clothes, the heat from inside the burning building would have ignited them, and he would possibly have burned to death. Story 17. I've always slept naked, but the heater in my room was broken and it was getting too cold even with the layers of blankets. I woke up that morning and knew I had the house to myself, at least till late afternoon, so I continued snoozing in my sister's room with the heater on. Next thing I knew, I heard voices coming up the stairs. It was my sister and her friends. I guess they decided to ditch school and thought I wasn't home. I had no other choice but to roll over and hide under the bed. They were hanging out in that room for a good 2 hours, and I was under the bed completely naked the whole time. That was almost 15 years ago, and she still has no idea. Story 18. Fortunately, nothing yet for me personally, although, to be honest, I don't sleep naked too often, especially this time of year. A university flatmate had a boyfriend with a supposedly fairly bent dick. She claimed it was the result of a nighttime falling out of bed, landing first with an erection. Story 19. I was in middle school and had been sleeping naked under the covers for years while my parents would come in and wake me up. Somehow, my body always managed to stay under the blanket by the time morning rolled around, so I was never worried about someone coming in the morning, only to see my bare self exposed. Well, one Saturday, I was sleeping in, and there was some event that my parents wanted to go to along with my older sister and me. They asked her to go in and wake me so I could get ready. My several years long streak of successfully being hidden by the blanket ended that day as my bare ass was exposed to the door of my bedroom. I woke up to the sound of my sister screaming at the top of her lungs, shouting, "Ew, why do you sleep naked?" I just remember thinking, I can't believe that after all that time of people coming into my room and waking me up with me being under the blanket, the one time I wasn't full under was the one time my sister came in. Story 20. Once when RAs in college knocked on my door in the middle of the night, and it took me a second to get up and get dressed. They were sus of me. Other than that, it has been nothing but great. Even got my partner hooked on sleeping the same way. Story 21. Getting my period in my BF's bed. I'm on a BCP that makes it impossible to know when it's coming on. Maybe every 4 weeks. Maybe heaving, spotting a week later. I just don't know. Fortunately, he is super chill every time it happens. I think being with him induces my periods. He goes out of town for a week or two. Nothing. He comes back. Sploosh. Story 22. Not really backfiring per se, but this made and makes my wife laugh whenever she thinks about it. A few weeks ago, we heard a crash at about 2:30 a.m. I groggily grabbed my 9mm. Shotgun is locked up downstairs while I research new safes, and went to investigate. I cleared the entire house buck naked. I went back to bed, locked my 9mm back in its case next to my bed, and laid down. About 2 minutes passed before we both started laughing hysterically about me walking through the house naked with a gun. Story 23. I was in a mental hospital, and my roommates and I were pretty close, so I was fine sleeping in my underwear. Sleeping there sucks, so I do anything to get a little more comfortable. Anyways, you get 15-minute checks there, even through the night. I guess I wasn't ready when they shined the flashlight in, and I covered up quickly. I got in trouble and was put on boundary precautions. There was a red dot by my name on the whiteboard, so everyone knew. From then on, I had to sit one couch square away from everyone, carefully monitored for the rest of my stay so I didn't get too close to my mental peers. Story 24. I wouldn't say it backfired, but there have been 2 times things went kinda sideways. Once when my daughter's heart respiratory monitor's alarm went off in the middle of the night, I jumped out of bed and performed CPR. Turns out I just forgot to plug the machine in, and its low battery alarm was the same as "Your kid is dying" alarm. After I got the alarm handled and was checking the baby, my father from the bedroom doorway asked if everything was okay. I said yes, it was all good, and he shut the door and left. I thought it was weird that he was standing outside the doorway looking at the ceiling. It wasn't until later when I was finally going back to sleep that I realized I was mostly nude. Except for a postnatal diaper thing, I was unclothed. Laughed so hard I woke the baby again. Months later, another event happened. By this time, the baby no longer has a monitor and hasn't stopped breathing for months. She's healthy enough to co-sleep, and I was rocking that bedtime nursing. Well, in the middle of the night, I wake up because there's something biting my nipple. Turns out baby woke up and decided to help herself to a midnight snack. Except she didn't get a good latch, got frustrated, and frickin' bit me. I tell her that story every chance I get. Why can't I have an ABC? Well, when you were about 4 months old. Why can't I go to XYZ? Well, one time you were very little. Story 25. Not me, but an old friend's father. They own a cabin in Northern California out in the wilderness and go up a time or two every year. One night, her dad decides to sleep outside on the porch in a sleeping bag, of course in the nude. While he's sleeping, a bear sneaks up to the pouch and grabs one of their coolers. This wakes him up, and he sees a small bear trundling away with their stuff. This 6'3", large, naked man gets out of his sleeping bag and begins chasing the bear while screaming at the top of his lungs. This scares the poor little bear, so he drops the cooler and hightails it. They still have the cooler to this day, complete with teeth marks. Story 26. I've slept in a nude for as long as I can remember. There have been a few times it's backfired on me since then. Putting aside the embarrassing times such as mom needed to get something from my room or I left my door open by mistake as a teen, which I only know now because my mother loves to casually tease me about my youth as mothers do. There are 2 times that come to mind where things got weird. I was a fairly troubled teen and was in a group home in the next state over for a few years. As I didn't want to be there, I eventually got really good at running away and finding a way back home. One of these times I got back to my house while my mom was at work and knocked right out. I woke to the sensation of my bed being kicked and loud banging. When I looked up, in nothing but a necklace and a single sock, I saw the local cop who usually brought me back, standing over my bed in the typical, look at me casually put my hand on my holster like I'm a friendly sheriff, and told me to toss on a shirt and pants and use the bathroom. Ended up back at the group home with flip-flops, a raggedy t-shirt, and loose boxer shorts. It was almost a week before visitation day, which meant that these were going to be my only shoes until my mother could bring me sneakers. The second time that comes to mind was in my late 20s. I lived in a crappy 3rd floor, 2-room apartment. Boxes for a TV stand and mattress on the floor for a bed. The neighborhood was in about the same shape. One morning, my girlfriend at the time and I were fast asleep, in the nude as usual. I half woke up for a moment and looked up to see someone standing over the foot of the bed. I didn't register who, or even a thread in my mind. I just assumed it was our roommate or girlfriend. I closed my eyes again before my brain reminded me that she was at work, and I sat up with a jolt. At the foot of our floor mattress was some random young guy I had never seen before. He wasn't leering at us or startled to see me awake. Didn't seem to be doing anything wrong, or doing anything really. He just kept looking forward as if we weren't even there. I screamed at him to leave, and he did. About 5 minutes later, my brain had booted up and I was out the door in whatever clothes I could grab fastest. The neighbors were calling the cops, and I went looking for him. When the cops got there and found him, it turned out he was just some dumb kid that had gotten absolutely wasted with his friends the night before and lived nearby. The police wanted to know what I wanted to do, and I asked how old he was. 19. I wasn't going to put some kid through the system for partying and being an idiot. I yelled at him, "Get your shit together," and told the cops that I didn't want to do anything about it. I just wanted him sent home if they could. Later that day, his father brought him up to my apartment again, the right way this time, and made it clear that I could pick his punishment. I lectured him, thanked his father, and got this cool story to tell. Story 27. When I was 16, my stepsister woke me up to tell me that Tim Hortons was on the phone. I had applied for a job there. I jump out of bed, and both of my arms are numb. I fumble around spectacularly trying to cover myself with my blanket in order to get to the phone. I run to my dad's room and pick up the heavy marble and gold rotary phone and smash myself in the forehead with it. I got the job. Story 28. One time I got up to get a glass of water in the middle of the night. I then fainted, the glass broke, and I fell on the shards. Woke up in a pool of blood right after. An extra layer could have probably helped with getting less cuts. Story 29. I think of my poor husband on vacation in Europe. The one time I convinced that man to sleep naked so he can be more comfortable, lol. We wake up to what we thought was the middle of the night, to blaring fire alarms in a hotel in London. He rarely sleeps naked, so he bolted out of bed assuming he was in boxers, grabbed his slippers, and ran out the door. Meanwhile, I was getting dressed right behind him, trying to get his attention to get dressed. He kept thinking I was worried and was yelling over me. I managed to get clothes on while he remained naked. We ran down 4 flights of stairs, made it to the front desk to ask what the commotion was about, only to find out it was 4 p.m., and this was a routine test of the fire alarms throughout the hotel. The hotel clerk then looked at my husband and said, "Despite being in Europe, we have a strict no nudity in the hotel lobby policy." I died laughing. My husband finally realized he wasn't dressed, looked at me and my pajamas, and started to grab Kleenex to cover up. The whole way up to the hotel room in the elevator, he was upset I didn't tell him. I couldn't stop laughing, so I began to cry. We looked like a hot mess getting out of that elevator. Best vacation story ever. Story 30. About 5 years ago, camping with some friends for senior week. I don't normally sleep naked, but it was very hot. I slept naked. My GF slept with minimal clothes. First night, my guy friend tried to scare me at like 1 or 2 in the morning. I was met with my birthday suit. He still teases me about it. I can't remember if it was the second or third night, but the same instance happened with my girlfriend's friend and her boyfriend who were drinking and rushed into our tent without knocking, I guess? I was fast asleep and don't remember the second one, but they do. They also still tease me about it. Story 31. This happened to a friend or neighbor of mine. It was a warm summer night, and my friends, a couple that lived across the street from me at the time, woke up to their phones blowing up from calls and texts from their next door neighbor. The neighbor said it looked like their house was on fire. So he got out of bed, naked, and ran to the other side of the house where the massage room, she does massage work out of their home, has flames crawling up one side of the wall. A candle was left on a small wooden shelving unit, and the unit caught fire. My naked friend picked up the fiery unit and ran it outside to the backyard and hosed it down while the next door neighbors were watching over the fence to make sure it was taken care of. His wife was inside, pouring water on the flames that had reached the floor and part of the wall. All was fine. They put it out, but the neighbors got a good show.